It started with a single, sharp bark that cut through the monotonous hum of the airport terminal. It wasn't a playful yap or an anxious whine. It was a command, a sound so full of authority and sudden violence that it made hundreds of people freeze mid-stride. Heads turned, conversations died, and the river of travelers shuffling towards their gates came to an abrupt, confused halt. The sound echoed off the polished floors and high glass ceilings, a sonic crack in the mundane shell of a Tuesday morning. At the center of it all was Max, a magnificent German shepherd with a coat of sable and gold, and his handler, Officer James Miller. For a heart-stopping second, no one understood what was happening. Max was a legend in the K-9 unit, a dog known for his ironclad discipline and an almost supernatural calm in the chaos of crowds. But right now, he was anything but calm. He was breaking every rule he had ever been taught. What happened next would leave everyone in that terminal utterly stunned. This wasn't just a story about a police dog. It was a story about an instinct so powerful it defied all logic and training. Stay with us, because the truth of what that dog sensed will leave you shocked and change the way you see the world. Before we dive into this incredible tale, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who believes in the power of unspoken bonds. And hey, I'm always curious, where are you watching from? Let me know your country in the comments below. It's amazing to see how far these stories of courage travel. The scene was security checkpoint 4. The air smelled of stale coffee, disinfectant, and the faint, anxious sweat of hurried travelers. Officer Miller and Max were on a routine sweep, a familiar dance they'd performed 1,000 times. Max would weave through the lines of people and luggage, his nose twitching, a finely tuned instrument deciphering the complex language of scent. Miller walked a few paces behind, his hand resting lightly on the handle of Max's harness, a silent connection between man and dog. They were approaching a family preparing to place their bags on the conveyor belt, a woman with tired eyes and a forced, brittle smile, and a little girl, no older than 6, clutching a worn teddy bear. The little girl had wide, frightened eyes that seemed too old for her face. She clung to the woman's leg, her tiny knuckles white around the bear's fuzzy ear. Their luggage was simple, one large suitcase and a small, bright pink carry-on decorated with cartoon unicorns. Max gave the large suitcase a cursory sniff, his tail giving a slow, neutral wag, and moved on. This was normal. He was methodical, efficient. He approached the small pink suitcase, the one belonging to the little girl. He lowered his head, his black nose hovering just inches from the glittery surface. And then he stopped. Everything about him changed. His body went rigid, the muscles in his powerful shoulders bunching up. A low growl rumbled deep in his chest, a sound Miller had only ever heard during the most intense training simulations. It was a sound that meant danger. Pure, undiluted danger. Miller's own body tensed. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, his voice low and steady, a practiced calm that masked the sudden jackhammering of his heart. Max was trained for this. The protocol was clear. If he detected explosives, narcotics, or other contraband, he was to sit. A passive, non-aggressive alert that would signal Miller to calmly evacuate the area and call in the bomb squad or narcotics unit. He was never, under any circumstances, to make physical contact with the luggage or create a scene. Max didn't sit. Instead, he did the one thing he was explicitly trained not to do. With a surge of muscle and a guttural bark that ripped through the air, he leaped. He launched his 90-pound body directly onto the pink unicorn suitcase, planting his front paws firmly on top of it. He lowered his head, bared his teeth at anyone who dared to approach, and refused to move. The suitcase was his. He had claimed it. Panic erupted. The woman shrieked, a high, piercing sound of manufactured terror. "Get that beast off my daughter's bag. What is wrong with you people? It's full of her toys. You're scaring her." The little girl began to sob, burying her face in the woman's coat. The crowd, which had been frozen in curiosity, now buzzed with alarm and indignation. People started pulling out their phones, recording the scene of a police dog seemingly gone rogue, attacking a little girl's property. Miller was mortified. His face burned with a mixture of confusion and professional shame. "Max off. Heel," he commanded, his voice sharp with an authority that had never once failed him. Max looked back at him, his intelligent brown eyes wide with a desperate, pleading intensity Miller had never seen before. He whined, a sound of pure anguish, but he didn't budge. His paws remained planted on that suitcase as if they were bolted to it. He was defying a direct order from the person he trusted most in the world. A senior TSA agent, a stern-faced man named Henderson, rushed over. "Miller, get your dog under control. Now, what the hell is going on?" "I don't know," Miller stammered, pulling harder on Max's harness. The dog was an anchor of sheer willpower. "He's never done this." "Never. Well, he's doing it now?" "You're creating a panic," Henderson snapped, his gaze flicking nervously at the growing crowd and the sea of cell phone cameras pointed their way. "That's a little girl's suitcase. For God's sake, man, get him off of there before he traumatizes the child for life." The woman was becoming more hysterical by the second. "He's trying to attack my daughter. I'm going to sue. I want your badge number. All of you." Her voice was shrill, but as Miller looked at her, he saw something flicker in her eyes behind the performance. It wasn't fear. It was something colder. It was rage. Miller's mind raced, trying to process the impossible. Max was the best of the best. He had graduated at the top of his class from the K-9 Academy. His scent detection record was flawless. He could distinguish between dozens of chemical compounds from 50 yards away. But his discipline was even more renowned. He was the rock, the standard by which all other K-9s in the unit were measured. He remembered the day he'd first been partnered with Max. The dog was just a year-old pup then, all lanky legs and boundless energy, but with a focus that was unnerving. Their bond hadn't been instant. It had been forged over months of grueling training in abandoned warehouses and dusty firing ranges. It was built on thousands of hours of repetition, trust exercises, and a shared language that went far beyond verbal commands. Miller knew every twitch of Max's ears, every subtle shift in his posture. And Max, in turn, could read Miller's own heart rate, his own anxiety, his own confidence, as if it were a book. This dog, his partner, his friend, was not just a tool. He was an extension of Miller himself. For Max to behave this way, to so flagrantly disobey, to act with such primal urgency, it wasn't a mistake. It couldn't be. It felt like the dog was screaming a warning in a language no one else could understand. "Max, down." "I said down," Miller commanded again, his voice cracking with desperation. He felt the weight of every eye in the terminal on him. His career, his reputation, and the fate of his canine partner were all imploding in a public spectacle. Max whined again, a heartbreaking sound of conflict. He shifted his weight, glancing from Miller's face to the suitcase, then back again. It was as if he was trying to reason with him. "Don't you see? Don't you understand? You have to listen to me," his eyes seemed to plead. Henderson had lost his patience. "That's it. Miller, remove your animal from the security area. Now, we'll deal with your disciplinary hearing later. I'll have him decertified for this." The word hit Miller like a physical blow. Decertified. It was a death sentence for a working dog. Max would be stripped of his badge, his purpose. He'd be retired, sent to live out his days as a pet, a hero reduced to a civilian. All because of this one, inexplicable moment. The woman, hearing this, smirked. A tiny, almost imperceptible upturn of her lips. But Miller saw it. And in that instant, a cold dread washed over him, even colder than the shame he was feeling. Something was wrong. Terribly, fundamentally wrong. He looked from the woman's triumphant smirk to the desperate eyes of his dog, and then to the little girl who was now silently crying, her tears tracking paths through the grime on her cheeks. The girl wasn't looking at her mother. She was looking at Max, and her expression wasn't one of terror. It was something else. A flicker of hope? Recognition. Miller made a decision. It was a choice that would either end his career or save a life. He let go of Max's harness. He straightened up, his shoulders squared, and he turned to face Henderson. "No," he said, his voice quiet but firm, cutting through the noise. Henderson stared at him, dumbfounded. "What did you just say to me, officer?" "I said no," Miller repeated, his gaze unwavering. He took a step forward, placing himself between the security agents and his dog. "A protector. We're not going anywhere. My dog has alerted on this bag. I trust him. We need to open it." The air crackled with tension. The woman's manufactured panic transformed into genuine fury. "You will not. That is private property." You have no right. It's filled with my daughter's underwear and toys. Do you want to humiliate a child? Ma'am, with all due respect, my dog is not a pet. He's a highly trained officer of the law, Miller said, his voice gaining strength. He was no longer a flustered handler. He was a cop with a gut feeling that was screaming at him. His alert is probable cause. We are opening the bag. Henderson looked like he was about to explode. He was about to order his agents to physically remove Miller, but something in the officer's eyes gave him pause. It was a conviction so absolute, so pure, that it was unsettling. He had seen that look before in the eyes of soldiers and cops who were walking into a fire, absolutely certain of what they had to do. Against his better judgment, against every rule in the thick TSA manual, Henderson hesitated. He looked at the dog, still standing guard over the small pink suitcase, a furry sentinel refusing to yield. The animal wasn't growling anymore. He was just watching, waiting, his entire being focused on the singular purpose of protecting that bag, or rather, what was inside it. The crowd was now a silent, captive audience. The drama was more compelling than any departure announcement. The entire terminal seemed to be holding its breath. Fine. Henderson finally spat out, his voice laced with venom. Fine. Open the bag, Miller. Open it right here, in front of everyone. And when you find nothing but dolls and dresses, I want your badge and your dogs. On my desk. You're finished. Miller nodded grimly. This was it. The point of no return. He turned to the woman. Ma'am, please open the suitcase. I will not, she shrieked. Then we'll open it for you. Henderson snapped, his patience completely gone. He gestured to two of his agents. Pop the latches. The woman lunged forward as if to stop them, but another agent blocked her path. She struggled for a moment, her face a mask of rage, before suddenly going limp, a chillingly calm expression settling over her features. She crossed her arms and smiled a cold, thin smile. Go ahead. Make fools of yourselves. Miller's heart pounded against his ribs. Doubt, cold and sharp, pierced through his resolve. What if she was right? What if this was all just a massive, catastrophic mistake? A brain tumor in his dog, a random misfire of synapses that had just cost them everything? He looked at Max, who was still watching intently, his body a coiled spring. Please, boy, Miller thought. Please be right. One of the agents knelt down. The sound of the zipper being pulled open was unnaturally loud in the silent terminal. It was a slow, deliberate sound, like the final seconds of a timer ticking down. The agent lifted the lid. The crowd craned their necks to see. Miller held his breath. Inside, just as the woman had said, were clothes. Tiny t-shirts, brightly colored leggings, a few pairs of socks. On top of them sat 3 stuffed animals, a fluffy white sheep, a purple dragon, and the worn, brown teddy bear the little girl had been clutching earlier. It must have been put in the bag when they reached the checkpoint. There was nothing else. No wires. No suspicious packages. No scent of chemicals or contraband. Nothing. A collective sigh of disappointment and anticlimax rippled through the onlookers. Henderson let out a short, bitter laugh. Well, Miller, there you have it. A pile of laundry and some toys. You just terrorized a mother and her child, caused a major security disruption, and ended your career over a unicorn suitcase full of nothing. The woman's smile widened. It was a victor's smile. I told you. I told you all. Now, if you're done harassing my family, we have a plane to catch. Miller felt the floor drop out from beneath him. A wave of nausea and despair washed over him. He had been so sure. He had bet his entire life, and Max's, on a gut feeling, and he had been wrong. He couldn't even look at his dog. The shame was too immense. He reached down to pull Max away, to accept his fate, to walk the longest, most humiliating walk of his life out of that terminal. But Max wasn't done. He ignored Miller's hand. He stepped forward, carefully, and nudged one of the stuffed animals with his nose. Not the sheep, not the dragon. The teddy bear. The one the girl had been holding so tightly. He pushed it gently towards Miller, then looked up at him, his eyes burning with that same desperate, urgent plea. He let out a soft whine. Miller froze. He looked at the bear. It was old and scruffy. One of its button eyes was loose, and its fur was matted in places. It looked completely innocuous. What now, Miller? Henderson scoffed. Is the teddy bear a threat too? But Miller wasn't listening. He was locked in a silent conversation with his partner. Max was telling him something. Not the bag. This. Look at this. Slowly, almost reverently, Miller reached into the suitcase and picked up the bear. It felt heavier than it should have. Not by much, but enough to be noticeable. He squeezed its plush belly, and his fingers brushed against something hard and cold, deep inside the stuffing. His blood ran cold. "Give me that," the woman suddenly screamed, her composure shattering like glass. She lunged for the bear, her fingers crooked into claws. "That's my daughter's. You can't take that." Her reaction was too violent, too panicked. It was the final piece of the puzzle. Miller held the bear out of her reach and turned to Henderson, his eyes wide. "There's something in here," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I can feel it." Without waiting for permission, Miller pulled a small multi-tool from his belt. He flipped out the knife blade. The woman let out a strangled cry. With a steady hand, Miller made a small incision in the bear's stitched seam, right over the hard object he'd felt. He slid his fingers inside, past the soft cotton stuffing, and closed them around the object. He pulled it out. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a brick of drugs. It was small, black, and rectangular, with a single, blinking red light. A GPS tracker. Advanced. Military grade. Next to it was a tiny, sophisticated listening device, still active. A stunned silence fell over the entire terminal. Every person, every agent, every traveler stared at the small electronic devices in Miller's hand. The blinking red light seemed to pulse in time with their own shocked heartbeats. Why would a mother plant a tracking device and a bug inside her own daughter's favorite toy? And then, it all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The girl's frightened, old eyes. The woman's manufactured hysteria and her cold, triumphant smirks. The little girl's strange, hopeful look at the dog. Max hadn't been alerting on contraband. He hadn't smelled explosives or narcotics. He had smelled something far more sinister. He had smelled the metallic, lithium tang of the electronics. Yes, but he had also smelled the cortisol. The scent of pure, undiluted fear pouring off the little girl. He hadn't been trying to attack the suitcase. He had been trying to save the child. The woman's face had gone chalk white. The mask was gone. All that was left was raw, cornered panic. She turned to run. But there was nowhere to go. The security agents, who moments before had been ready to arrest Miller, now moved with swift, practiced efficiency. They swarmed her, cuffing her hands behind her back before she could take 2 steps. She didn't scream. She didn't protest. She just sagged, defeated. The little girl, who had been watching everything with wide, unblinking eyes, let out a small sob. She didn't run to the woman who was being arrested. She took a hesitant step, and then another, towards the man in the uniform and his big, beautiful dog. Miller's own shock was so profound he could barely move. He looked down at the devices in his hand, then at the woman, then at the little girl. He finally understood. "She's not her mother," he said, the words feeling heavy and unreal in his mouth. "This is a kidnapping." The entire terminal froze. The realization hit them like a physical force, a wave of collective shock and horror. This wasn't a simple security incident. They were witnesses to the final, desperate moments of a child abduction. The woman was taking this little girl out of the country, and the devices in the bear were likely for the buyers on the other end to track their package. The little girl, whose name they would later learn was Lily, stopped a few feet from Miller. She looked up at him, her lower lip trembling. Then she looked at Max. The dog, his duty done, was now perfectly calm. He sat down, his tail giving a soft thump-thump-thump against the floor. He lowered his head and nudged her hand with his wet nose, a gesture of profound gentleness and comfort. Lily's face crumpled, and for the first time, she let out a real cry, a cry of relief. She threw her small arms around Max's thick neck and buried her face in his fur, sobbing. Max didn't move. He stood like a statue, a furry guardian, accepting her embrace, letting her pour all her fear and loneliness into him. Miller knelt down, his own eyes burning with tears. "It's okay," he whispered to the little girl. "You're safe now. You're safe." Henderson stood motionless, his face pale, his jaw slack. He looked from the crying child hugging the heroic dog, to the cuffed kidnapper, to the tracking devices still in Miller's hand. He walked over to Miller, his expression a mixture of awe and deep, profound humility. "Miller, he started, but the words wouldn't come. He swallowed hard. I've never seen anything like it. He knew. How in the world did he know? Miller looked at Max, who was now gently licking the tears from Lily's face. A bond was forming right there on the cold tile floor of the airport, a bond between a lost little girl and the hero who had saved her. He didn't just smell the electronics, Henderson, Miller said, his voice thick with emotion. He smelled her fear. He knew she was in danger. He wasn't alerting on the bag. He was alerting on the situation. He was protecting her. The truth of it was almost too much to comprehend. A dog's instinct, his loyalty and perception, had succeeded where all the technology and human observation in a high-security airport had failed. He had seen the truth, not with his eyes, but with his nose and his heart. The aftermath was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. The airport police took the kidnapper into custody for interrogation. Federal agents were called in. The story unraveled quickly. The woman was part of a sophisticated human trafficking ring. Lily had been abducted from a park in a nearby city 3 days earlier. Her real parents had been living through every parent's worst nightmare, a hell of uncertainty and terror. The flight the kidnapper was about to board was a one-way trip to a country with no extradition treaty. If Max hadn't stopped them, if Miller hadn't trusted him, Lily would have vanished forever. An hour later, as things began to calm down, the most emotional scene of all unfolded. Lily's real parents arrived at the airport, their faces etched with sleepless agony and desperate hope. They ran through the terminal, escorted by police, their eyes scanning the crowd wildly. And then they saw her. Lily was sitting in a chair in a quiet corner, wrapped in a blanket, sipping a juice box. Max was lying at her feet, his head resting on her tiny sneakers. When Lily saw her parents, her face lit up with a joy so pure and radiant it felt like the sun breaking through the clouds. "Mommy, Daddy," she cried, scrambling off the chair. The reunion was a beautiful, heart-wrenching explosion of tears and laughter and desperate hugs. Her parents held her as if they would never let her go again, their bodies shaking with sobs of relief. After a few minutes, Lily's father looked up, his eyes red and swollen, searching for the man who had made this moment possible. He saw Miller standing respectfully a short distance away. He walked over, pulling his wife and daughter with him. He was a big man, but he looked completely broken and rebuilt all at once. He tried to speak, but no words came out. He simply threw his arms around Officer Miller and hugged him tightly, a raw, grateful embrace from one father to another. Then, he knelt down in front of Max. The big German shepherd looked up at him, his tail wagging slowly. The man reached out a trembling hand and stroked Max's head, his touch full of reverence. "You saved her," he whispered, his voice choked with tears. "You saved our little girl. How can we ever thank you?" Max just leaned into his touch, accepting the gratitude with a quiet dignity. He knew. He had done his job. Later that day, back at the K-9 unit headquarters, the atmosphere was one of celebration. The story had already hit the news, and calls were flooding in from all over the country, praising the hero dog of Terminal C. Max was given a hero's welcome. He was showered with praise, affection, and a giant, juicy steak that he devoured in under a minute. Henderson, the TSA chief, had called Miller personally. His voice was humbled, changed. "What your dog did today, Miller, it's going to change the way we do things. We rely so much on our machines, on our protocols. We forget to trust instinct. Not just ours, but theirs." He paused. "There will be no disciplinary hearing. Instead, I'm recommending you both for the highest commendation we can offer." That evening, as the sun set, casting long shadows across the training field, Miller sat on a bench with Max. The dog rested his heavy head on Miller's knee, his eyes soft and content. The chaos of the day had faded, leaving behind a profound sense of peace. Miller stroked Max's ears, his mind replaying the moment he had to choose between his orders and his dog. It was the easiest and hardest decision he had ever made. He had looked into his partner's eyes and seen not disobedience, but a desperate certainty. He had seen the truth. "You knew, didn't you, boy?" Miller murmured, his voice full of wonder. "You knew all along. You saw what none of us could see." Max just looked up at him, his tail giving a gentle thump against the bench. He didn't need words. Their bond was deeper than that. It was a silent, unbreakable contract of trust and loyalty, forged in shared purpose and sealed in a moment of crisis. The world is full of noise and confusion, of rules and protocols designed to keep us safe. But sometimes, safety isn't found in a manual. Sometimes, the purest truths are spoken without a voice. They're communicated in the desperate bark of a loyal friend, in the unwavering gaze of a partner who sees the darkness we miss, and in the profound, simple courage of a hero with four paws and a heart of gold. Max's story became a legend, a reminder that the most advanced security system in the world is no match for the instinct of a loving and loyal animal. It taught an entire city, and soon the world, to listen a little closer to those who cannot speak, for their language is one of pure instinct and unwavering truth. The bond between a man and his dog had not only saved a child's life, but it had also reminded thousands of people that the greatest heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes, they wear a collar and a badge, and they see the world not just as it is, but as it should be, a place where the innocent are always protected. The incident prompted a review of K-9 training protocols nationwide. Experts in animal behavior were brought in to consult with law enforcement agencies. They studied the tapes of Max at the airport, analyzing every nuance of his body language. They concluded that it was a new type of alert, one they termed a protective intervention. It wasn't about scent detection in the traditional sense. It was a holistic response to a perceived threat against a vulnerable individual. Max had not been trained for this. It was something innate, a combination of his breeding, his bond with Miller, and an intelligence that bordered on the psychic. New training modules were developed, teaching handlers to recognize these more subtle, complex cues, to learn to trust their partner's instincts even when they defied conventional logic. Officer Miller and Max were asked to lead some of these training sessions. They traveled to different cities, a living testament to the power of their bond. Miller would tell the story, his voice filled with pride, while Max would sit calmly by his side, occasionally nudging a nervous new recruit with his nose as if to offer encouragement. For Lily and her family, life slowly began to return to normal, but it was a new normal, one forever marked by the miracle that had happened at the airport. They visited Miller and Max often. Lily, who had been a quiet and withdrawn child even before her abduction, began to blossom. She was no longer afraid of the world. She would run across the K-9 training field, laughing, with Max loping happily beside her, his self-appointed guardian. She drew countless pictures of him, Max with a superhero cape, Max with wings, Max standing on a pile of bad guys. Her parents framed every single one. They established a foundation in Max's name, called Max's Guardians, which provided funding for K-9 units in underfunded police departments and supported the adoption of retired police dogs. They wanted to ensure that other heroes like Max had everything they needed to keep their communities safe. One afternoon, about a year after the incident, Miller was watching Lily play with Max. She was throwing a tennis ball, and Max, despite his age and the dignity of his profession, was chasing it with the goofy abandon of a puppy. Lily's father came and stood next to Miller, watching the scene. "You know," he said quietly, "for weeks after we got her back, she had terrible nightmares. She'd wake up screaming. We tried everything, therapy, night lights, leaving the door open. Nothing worked." He paused, his eyes on his daughter. "Then, one day, we brought her here to see Max. That night, she slept through for the first time. We asked her the next morning if she'd had a nightmare. She said she did, but that it was okay. She said, 'Max was in my dream this time. He chased the monsters away.'" Miller felt a familiar lump form in his throat. He looked at his partner, his friend, who was now trotting back with the ball, his tail a furry metronome of happiness. He was more than just a dog. He was a guardian, a comforter, a chaser of monsters both real and imagined. The world had seen Max as a hero for what he did in a single moment of dramatic intervention. But Miller knew his heroism was quieter, deeper. It was in his everyday loyalty, his unwavering presence, and his ability to heal a wound no one else could see. He hadn't just saved a life, he had restored a childhood. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Miller called out, "Okay, Max, time to go." Max dropped the ball, gave Lily's hand one last affectionate lick, and trotted over to Miller's side, falling into his familiar position at heel. Man and dog walked off the field together, their silhouettes merging into one against the fading light. They were partners. They were family. And they were a living, breathing reminder that sometimes the most important thing you can do in a world full of doubt is to simply trust your dog. His story reminds us to listen to those who cannot speak, to trust the instincts that defy explanation. If this incredible story of a true hero touched your heart, please share it so that Max's courage and loyalty can inspire others. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that prove the most powerful bonds are the ones we can't see, but can only feel. Until next time, trust your instincts and never underestimate the heart of an animal.